Hello, this is R.J. Deacon reading the Supreme Court of the United States opinion syllabus in Stokeling v. United States, certiorari to the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. Argued October 9th, 2018. Decided January 15th, 2019. Petitioner Stokeling pleaded guilty to possessing a firearm and ammunition after having been convicted of a felony in violation of 18 U.S.C. 922 G1. Based on Stokeling's prior criminal history, the probation office recommended the mandatory minimum 15-year prison term that the Armed Career Criminal Act, ACCA, provides for 922G violators who have 3 previous convictions for a violent felony, 924E. As relevant here, Stokeling objected that his prior Florida robbery conviction was not a violent felony, which ACCA defines in relevant part as any crime punishable by imprisonment for a term exceeding 1 year that has an element the use, attempted use, or threatened use of physical force against the person of another, 924E2B1. The district court held that Stokeling's actions during the robbery did not justify an ACCA sentence enhancement, but the 11th Circuit Court reversed. The Supreme Court held, affirmed the 11th Circuit, ACCA's elements clause encompasses a robbery offense that requires the defendant to overcome the victim's resistance. As originally enacted, the ACCA prescribed a sentence enhancement for certain individuals with 3 prior convictions for robbery or burglary, 18 U.S.C. Section 1202A, and defined robbery as an unlawful taking by force or violence, Section 1202C8, a clear reference to common law robbery, which required a level of force or violence sufficient to overcome the resistance of the victim, however slight. When Congress amended ACCA 2 years later, it replaced the enumerated crimes with the elements clause, an expanded enumerated offenses clause, and the now-defunct residual clause. The new elements clause extended ACCA to cover any offense that has an element, quote, the use, attempted use, or threatened use of physical force, end quote, 924E2B1, emphasis added, by replacing robbery with a clause that has force as its touchstone. Congress retained the same common law definition that undergirded the definition of robbery in the original ACCA. This understanding is buttressed by the then widely accepted definitions of robbery among the states, a significant majority of which defined non-aggravated robbery as requiring a degree of force sufficient only to overcome a victim's resistance. Under Stokeling's reading, many of the state robbery statutes would not qualify as ACCA predicates, but federal criminal statutes should not be construed in ways that would render them inapplicable in many states. This understanding of physical force comports with Johnson v. United States. The force necessary for misdemeanor battery addressed in Johnson does not require resistance or even physical aversion on the part of the victim. Rather, the slightest offensive touching would qualify. It is thus different in kind from the force necessary to overcome resistance by a victim, which is inherently violent in the sense contemplated by Johnson, and suggests a degree of power that would not be satisfied by the merest touching. Johnson did not purport, as Stokeling suggests, to establish a force threshold so high as to exclude even robbery from ACCA's scope. Stokeling's suggested definition of physical force reasonably expected to cause pain or injury, is inconsistent with the degree of force necessary to commit robbery at common law. Moreover, the court declined to adopt this standard in Johnson. Stokeling's proposal would prove exceedingly difficult to apply, would impose yet another indeterminable line-drawing exercise on the lower courts, and is not supported by the United States v. Castleman. Robbery under Florida law qualifies as an ACCA predicate offense under the Elements Clause, The term physical force in ACCA encompasses the degree of force necessary to commit common law robbery, and the Florida Supreme Court has made clear that the robbery statute requires resistance by the victim that is overcome by the physical force of the offender. Robinson v. State. The decision below is affirmed. Justice Thomas delivered the opinion of the court, in which Justices Breyer, Alito, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh joined. Justice Sotomayor filed a dissenting opinion, in which Chief Justice Roberts and Justices Ginsburg and Kagan joined. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to get a hold of the podcast, we can be reached at rhodesscholar80@gmail.com. That's ROADS and 80. Thank you.